It is estimated that over 8 million Americans are suffering with an eating disorder. And it's also estimated that half of the population knows someone with an eating disorder. Using that statistic, over half the people in this room, if not more, know someone who is suffering. Today, I would like to talk about the different types of eating disorders, their effects, and what to look out for, along with tying in a personal aspect to this global problem. First off, I would like to talk about anorexia nervosa. It is a pathological fear of gaining weight, which leads to faulty eating patterns, such as starvation, overexercise, malnutrition. Next is bulimia nervosa. It's faulty eating with the desire to prevent weight gain by means of purging, laxative abuse, and overexercise. Next is binge eating disorder. It is eating past the point of fullness or past the appropriate amount of food. It happens at least once a week for 3 months. You can also see it in stress over binge episodes and loss of control over the amount eaten. Here are some other types of eating disorders. There is purging disorder, night eating disorder, unspecified feeding or eating disorder, and rumination. Here are some of the effects of eating disorders. There is dizziness, fainting, malnutrition, loss of hair, menstrual irregularity, dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, heart and organ problems, and even death. Recognizing the signs. There are many signs to recognize an eating disorder, some of which are constantly talking about food and exercise, changing in what you eat and exercise regimes. Body image is often talked about. Excessive exercise, weight loss or weight gain, and wearing bagging clothes to hide those. Here are some of the signs that you can recognize. Usually, if someone's suffering with an eating disorder, you're not only starving your body, but your brain as well. For communication is a problem, along with poor performance. Isolation and disappearing after meals is also a sign. Same with guilt after eating. Next, I would like to talk about the personal aspect of it. Eating disorders have always been something personal yet distant to me. My family never talked about them. I was never fully exposed to them, even though someone very close in my family has been suffering for decades. Typically, research focuses on the masses, a large group of people randomly selected to find a genetic variant in those. But the University of Iowa and the University of Texas Southwestern University Medical Center decided to take an opposite approach. They decided to research individual families where eating disorder was a common occurrence through generations. I found this out myself when I was sitting in a doctor's office being screened for an eating disorder. I was told that if I continued to lose the weight, that I would be referred to a clinic. Of course, I did not listen. I continued to hide it from my family, my friends, and my doctors. It went unnoticed because, sure, I would eat. I would eat regularly in front of my parents. That was the only time. I went unnoticed by doctors because I avoided weigh-ins, appointments, and checkups, to where they did not see what was happening. I continued my downhill spiral for several years. But sadly, what I knew was that being discovered is not a slow reveal. It's hot and it's fast and it happens out of nowhere. And for some reason, with the collective consciousness, when one person finds out, everyone does. Rewind 4 years. I was standing on track in North Carolina in an illy fitting PE uniform. I was uncomfortable. I was what you would call an early bloomer, being taller and wider than everyone else, to where I was bullied and ridiculed and teased and ostracized for years because of that. So as I'm standing on that track, I look to my very close friend and say, "How do I look?" She looked me up and down, and in deep consideration, she said, "You're fine, but a little bottom heavy." I took that comment to heart, and that day at lunch, I began paying attention to what I was eating. Eventually, I went on a diet. I don't remember much between that mid-spring and summer, because I was only eating 1,000 calories a day, if not less. And because of starving your body, you starve your brain. After that summer of starvation, I fell into a restrict and binge pattern. to where my weight yo-yoed back to its original. And that was right before I began school at SeaburyHall. We moved not only because we loved the region, but in hope to remove myself from that toxic environment. After a few months at Seabury, I was back where I began. I was bullied, I was teased, I was humiliated, and I began to hate myself. And I believed that if I was thin, like all the other 8th grade girls, I would be liked. So I fell deeper into a pattern of restricting, eating only 500 calories a day. I was absolutely miserable. I began to self-harm in hopes to punish myself for overeating, and I fell into a deep suicidal depression that I still suffer with. Mid my 8th grade year, I met a boy. Sure, this sounds like your stereotypical boy meets girl story, but has a darker turn. Halfway into our relationship, the verbal abuse began. He told me that he liked me most when I was skinny, and I should stop eating again. And if I stopped eating, he would stop cheating on me. After we broke up, his words stuck so deeply to where I truly believed that I was unlovable unless I was thin. Eventually, I just stopped. I isolated myself. I hid myself under layers of clothes. And I continued to push even harder to lose weight. People began to notice, but in a positive and negative way. I was complimented, I was appreciated, I was noticed by them. People wanted to be my friend. But I realize now that it wasn't because I was thin. It was because of that cynical self-confidence I had, that when I saw that number on the scale go down, I liked myself better. And they didn't know that. They just saw me loving and appreciating myself, to where eventually they began to love and appreciate me. But at that time, it was too late. I pushed harder. And at the end of that year, I stood at 5'7", 5'8", with a BMI of 16.0, where anything below 18.5 is considered underweight. There was no sudden realization that I had a problem. There was no 180 turnaround that made me think, hey, I need to pick up my life right now. That doesn't happen. I still struggle today. I still fight with thoughts of saying, if I was thin, I'd be pretty. If I was thin, I would be loved. But I look at my friends and family and realize that no matter what, they love me. And I don't need a certain body type. I don't need a certain number to eat or a certain number to see to be loved. And even though I struggle today, I'm not going to stop pushing for recovery. I'm not going to stop learning to love myself again. And speaking of recovery, here are the steps for it. The first one is precontemplation, as in do not be in denial of your friends, families, or relatives, or child's disorder. Because the more that you're in denial, the more that it continues to grow. Be aware. Be aware of their patterns. Be aware of their disordered behavior. Because slowly when you notice, they'll notice. Because there was a time for me that I refused to believe I had a problem. I thought that eating right at the starvation line was normal because I became so comfortable with it. Share your thoughts and feelings. Let them know that they are not only hurting themselves, they're hurting you. Make sure that they know that you love them no matter what. Next is contemplation. Educate yourself on the disorder. Do research about it. See what it really is, because it's not only losing weight, it's also a mental disorder. So understand your child's thought process when it comes to this. Understand that it's not just body-wise. It comes from a deep-seated pain that has not been solved, to where most would recommend therapy. And don't try to fix the problem yourself. If needed, take your child, friend, relative, or anything to a professional. Because even though you believe you know what's best for them, that may not be true. And for the parents, We know that you love your children. We know that you love us and that you'll do anything for us. But sometimes there's some things that you just can't fix on your own. Next is preparation. Identify what needs to be changed. Identify the root of the disorder. Explore your options, whether it be therapy, inpatient or outpatient programs, or deciding to give an ultimatum of sorts. Say, you need to do this, or we will have to do it for you. Because usually eating disorders are about control. And if your child feels, if your friend feels, if your family feels like they have control in the situation, that will help them. And involvement. Talk to your team, your friends, your family, your child, doctors, how you can help in this. Because of course, you don't want them to be alone. Next is action. Follow the steps that are given to you by doctors or therapy or your child, and remove triggers from the house. No diet foods, no scales, no stress. And be warm and gentle, but set strict rules and boundaries to prevent relapse. And maintenance. Applaud efforts in a positive way. Do not say, you look so much better now that you gained 20 pounds. Because that is just a very bad idea. Redefine body image and weight and appearance. Don't say that you are your body, say you are your character. And we are proud that you are changing this because that shows how strong you are. And be aware that there's always the potential for relapse. Usually, on average, it takes several attempts to fix the problem, similar to smoking. For example, you can always choose to quit cold turkey, but there's always that craving. There's always that want in the back of your mind that you give in to occasionally. Doesn't mean you have to stop right then. It means that you have to have a plan, have motivation to stop, and that's the same with disorders. It's hard to stop right away, as it is with any habit, with any addiction, and with any problem. And prevention. If you follow the stages of change, you can help prevent relapse. But if there is, find a coping way with it. Make a relapse prevention plan. See if the person with anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, night eating, purging, see if they are ready to do this on their own, to see when it is time to stop these these stages of change and to stop the recovery process. See if they are ready to move on their own. And if you want any more information, feel free to go to these links to find more information, including symptoms, signs, and therapy and requested specialists. Thank you.